All right, so we're going to see Benjamin Netanyahu's excuse for invading Iran. It's continuation of why they're going to need to strike a bunch of like elementary schools and hospitals and then make the excuse that there's missiles there and then find no missiles, but then secretly just kill the leadership, which is not going to be a secret, and then they're going to continue to find out the leadership is actually this other guy who they also assassinate, and then it's going to be replaced by this other guy who is actually the real leader. And then it's going to continue onward for multi-generations since they're all fighting a cultural war and not actually a war on WMDs. So let's see exactly what his excuse is for invading another country on behalf of the Anglo-Saxon Christian Protestant excuse.
My brothers and sisters, citizens of Israel, a short time ago, Israel and the United States embarked on a joint campaign, Operation Urban Warfare. The goal of the operation? To put an end to the threat from the tyrannical regime in Iran. At this time, the IDF is attacking targets of the oppressive regime, facilities of the Revolutionary Guards.
So far, they've struck an elementary school and a couple military bases and some civilian infrastructure in Dubai.
And the Basid.
Iran, sorry, but Iran struck the civilian infrastructure in Dubai, and America struck the elementary schools, and it struck a lot of infrastructure in Iran with America and Israel working together, which there's confirmed deaths of elementary kids slaughtered.
And together with the U.S. military, ballistic missile sites that threaten both Israel and U.S. forces.
See, they're mentioning the missile sites again, but the martyrs are all children. So you got to pay attention to who exactly is getting struck here. Because unless there's a giant missile silo like Despicable Me underneath the elementary school and it just opens up, they just bombed a bunch of children. So this is why a lot of the Israelis get tricked a lot in their head. They think they're getting played, but really they just don't need to hit the button to bomb the school. So they need to pay attention.
This operation will continue as long as necessary. For 47 years, the evil regime in Iran has been saying death to Israel, death to America. It has trampled on the citizens of its country. It has imposed a curse on the peoples of the region. It has spread a network of terror throughout the world. It has invested enormous resources to develop atomic bombs and tens of thousands of missiles that were intended, as it defined it, to wipe Israel off the map of the world. He also armed the terrorist branches around us, in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Judea, and Samaria, and he has shed our blood. But if anyone needed further proof of the murderous nature of the regime of the tyrants, they got it last month. Because we all saw how this regime of terror in Tehran carried out an unprecedented mass massacre of the citizens of Iran itself. He murdered thousands of children, adults, and the elderly in cold blood.
That does not give him the excuse to do the same. They want to do the exact same thing and pretend it's for justice. I've experienced a lot of this in America. A lot of people in America who are, suspiciously supremacists will oftentimes say you're an evil person, you're like a rapist, pedophile, serial killing monster terrorist, and they'll attach that to a Latino and or any Fox News headline. So this is the same excuse they're pretty much pushing, is that because you're like this rapist, pedophile, serial killing terrorist, they have the right to then become a serial killing pedophile, rapist, psychopath, which is why a lot of the people saw the cover up in Israel with the cover up of the rape, the guys being not guilty, and then you see the established ideology of slaughtering the innocent with Gaza, and then the slaughtering of children in Iran, which is then, of course, killing children's pedophilia, but also they extradite pedophiles to Israel and try to protect them under the premise of blood libel, which is then, again, a continuation of the supremacist ideology. So you have to be very careful with these excuses a lot of these world leaders use. These world leaders are intending to build their entire temple of ideological alignments on the premise and concept that if you're worse than them, then they are allowed to sort of get right underneath where you are. And so because if you killed 10, they only killed 5, they want to stick with the 5. So a lot of the reason they're making excuses for Iran is they want to play the proxy game that every terrorist that died was a victim of the Iranian ideology, and that everyone who died by the proxies and terrorism is actually another victim. So they want to combine statistics, kind of like how the Black Book combined a bunch of communist deaths to say a bunch of Jews died. So it's very confusing, but they like to conflate a lot of the statistics in order to push this agenda that they are justified in committing one of the worst war crimes or invasions that'll ever happen. And if you understand how wars take place in the Middle East, it's not Israel, because Israel loses like they do in Lebanon. If America steps in, then you're going to have a complete Israel, because Israel was funded completely by the war machine in America. So if there's any invasion in Iran, they're just going to hide behind a bunch of Protestant Christians and then say it was a justified attack based on civilization, which is why you have to be very careful with these propagandists switching side.
Tens of thousands were imprisoned, tortured, and humiliated. And why? Only because they wanted a life of freedom and dignity. In the War of Rebirth and Operation Dog Nation, our heroic soldiers crushed the regime of the tyrants and their proxies. But the wounded beast of prey has not ceased its attempts to lash out for the same purpose, to destroy them. In recent months, the tyrants in Iran have been plotting to rebuild their nuclear and missile capabilities and to bury them underground, where we cannot harm them. If we don't stop them now, they will be immune, and that's why their negotiators are trying to buy time. Trying to buy time in a futile and false negotiation with our American friends. But the tyrants in Iran have made a mistake, because the United States is not buying their lies, and we will not sit idly by as the shadow of annihilation hangs over us. And so we have now embarked on Operation Shagat Ha'ari, an operation that is much more powerful than Operation Al-Ham Kalbi, which was very powerful. We are doing this in full coordination with our friends in the United States under the courageous leadership of President Trump. Together with the United States, we have severely purged the terrorist regime. We will create conditions that will allow the brave Iranian people to throw off the yoke of this murderous regime. During Operation Dog People, I was asked many times whether the operation was aimed at overthrowing the regime, in addition to the nuclear and missile threat. And I sat there thinking that was not the aim.
They're again trying to push for the missile threat. Let's finish. He says he's not the aim, but again, I don't think these guys actually care about the Islamic world because there's a bunch of impoverished Islamic countries around them that none of them are funding or uplifting, and they just want to bomb a bunch of people who are uplifting them because they think that every Muslim that gets out of poverty is just a new terroristic threat. So a lot of these words need to be backed up by their action.
But that could certainly be the result. And indeed, this is exactly what began to happen when millions of Iranians took to the streets, and now they are given the opportunity to take their fate into their own hands. Citizens of Israel, as in the case of the people of Kalbi, even in the siege of the cities, we will all be required to have endurance and fortitude, because there will be prices, and perhaps heavy prices. But I know these are wonderful forces that are in our people. These are wonderful forces that are in you, the citizens of Israel. Since the War of Rebirth began, we have stood together, and today we will stand together, bravely, in brotherhood, in mutual guarantee. I ask all of you to strictly observe the instructions of the Home Front Command. Because you already know, these instructions save lives. Challenging days lie ahead. Every military action carries risk, but the risk of not acting is immeasurably greater. Because if we don't act, we will get a nuclear Iran, an Iran with tens of thousands of ballistic missiles, an Iran that will work to destroy us and will be immune to our countermeasures. As the people of Chafetz Chaim, we have no choice but to go into battle. But this time we are doing it with the combined mighty power of the State of Israel and the United States of America. From here, I would like to address the citizens of Iran. You, the citizens of Iran, and the Iranian army, the Artash, are not our enemies, and we are not your enemies. We have a common enemy, the murderous faction of the Hayatollahs that has been transformed upon you through the repressive forces of the Revolutionary Guards and the Bashir. They are the ones who degraded your wonderful country, degraded it to the lowest level.
It sounds like they're pushing the same agenda as they did with El Mencho, like that everyone just spawned in and went crazy and started shooting things up, and then they have the CNG tell them that it's peaceful now. It's like a Latino cartel thing. They're trying to like swap out the leadership. It's kind of like Venezuela, but Venezuela kind of capitulated to the idea that the president is someone who should be constantly keeping the people alive, and it's actually Maduro that's the issue. They're trying to go for regime swaps, which regime swaps, like, traditionally back in the day, they'd go for the most brutal leader in order to dethrone them by just using diplomacy or political discussion. But it looks like now they're reversing it, where they're just dethroning, and then the political discussion comes from the people themselves into the leadership. So the leadership itself is swapped by a more culturally accepted people rather than a more aggressive CIA or aggressive toppling regime or that has more power over the people. So I don't know how successful this is going to be because he's an Israeli talking to a bunch of Muslims who've been in essentially a culture war with multiple proxies in between them, and their proxies constantly get trained by the very people he's appealing to. So I think this is not going to fall flat. I think a lot of the people in Iran don't like anyone to do with Western imperialism because they saw exactly what was going to happen if they don't fight back or create some sort of a nuclear weapon or some sort of a device to just keep them away from the headquarters, while everyone else just sees for themselves how the Western imperialists don't care if they slaughter everyone in the area.
They are the ones who nurtured you, your people, and therefore, in full coordination with the President of the United States, I tell you, anyone who will put their teeth in, including among the regime forces, will ensure their safety and ensure their future. The Iranian people in all their parts, the Persians, the Kurds, the Azeris, the Baluchis, the Apsakis, and all the other citizens of this wonderful nation. This is your opportunity to establish a new and free Iran. Take your fate into your own hands. Raise your heads, look up to the sky. Our forces there, the pilots of the free world, are all coming to your aid. And I believe that today will not be a day when Israel and a free Iran will join hands for the sake of security and peace, for the sake of progress and prosperity.
Okay, so the only angle I see them playing right now that could actually win in the terms of why they're there for freedom is the Bloody Sunday equivalency that happened in the United States of America, where a bunch of musket men just shot into the protesters crowd and slaughtered so many of the people that the people themselves had to fight back against the redcoats or the Queen's or King's army, and thereby establish a more free democracy. So I believe that their entire ideology right now is to push against them because they did a big mistake that led to countless deaths that they're hoping is really going to sink in with the civilian base so that the civilian base over time tells the soldiers and army that no, you don't understand, they're allowing us to keep our country and our people, we just need to get rid of the leadership to cause a panic stir in order to regime swap. So I see their angle. It's a very clever one, but again, it's going to have to placate on the idea that when you strike an elementary school or you kill civilian targets because you got tricked, or if that's the excuse you want to use, but if you kill a bunch of people, then you're going to hope that your Bloody Sunday is lesser than their Bloody Sunday, in which case you're going to just reaffirm the idea that the leadership in Iran is probably going to reassert themselves toward the populace, that is going to be more toward the culturally accepted ideology, and therefore reaffirm back into what they would see as a new IRGC with a new leadership, and they're just going to retreat back into it because a lot of the Western ideology clashes on the concept that they think they're there for humane value, but then they kill a bunch of people and call them martyrs. The Iranians call them martyrs, but then the Israelis call them like cowards or terrorists that were actually covering for them, which is a bad look. So again, it's gonna reassert itself to a cultural understanding of why a lot of them will just go back to the core culture. Which, of course, if you change your culture, then you get westernized, which is the biggest issue, is that none of them want to be westernized, and that a lot of them just have a lot of cultural strengths that they know that develop nuclear weapons, or the fear of them, that if they just ignore the West, that they can continue to build their threat or their fear of any other ideology, because they know they're already intelligent enough on the path of what they culture they decided, that they're going to continue down that path anyway, which is why a lot of these guys are already prepared for boots on the ground, and this is just like a show for the people that are like liberal or leftist. So when they eventually do invade, they're going to give the excuse that we tried everything we can, like discussion, but the discussion came after the slaughter, which they'll say again, like I said earlier, as long as you kill 10 and we kill 5, then the 5 is what matters, and they're just going to go off like kill math. So the kill math is going to be a tweak to the accordance to what they deem is more acceptable. But in the perspective of a civilian, they don't want anyone to die. They just want people to talk, which is why AOC's statement makes a lot of sense. She says violence begets violence, and we need to stop the war because all you're going to do is inspire the next generation who has no mom, no dad, no brother, sister, because they were slaughtered at an elementary school, that you now have to get like tons of martyrs to fight back against who don't are not coordinated. But even if they were, it's just going to be a reiteration of Afghanistan. And then Afghanistan is going to use the resources because they're fighting with Pakistan, but they know what it takes to fight against a first world, but a third world with jets and bombs. It's eventually going to be a full wipeout like North Korea. You attack all the infrastructure until they're put back to the Stone Age. And then the Stone Age is a privilege because you somehow survived your culture getting bombed and slaughtered. So it's just going to return to devolving a society, which is genocide, and then establishing themselves as the heroes as they set them back multiple generations, take away their infrastructure, their scientists, slaughter anyone who opposes them, and then essentially instills a more pro-slaughter ideology, which is going to be eventually noticed and then rebelled against, and then it's going to continue again. This regime swap has to be one based on humanity, and if it's based on, again, a lot of dead martyrs, and the martyrs are children, and not even children with guns, because you can't push that agenda either. I saw the picture of a bloody backpack. They're not going to win this war based on the perspective of humanity, because humanity would never have gone to war with Iran to begin with.
Citizens of Israel, I would like to thank from the bottom of my heart the President of the United States, Donald Trump, the American people, the American military. President Trump is not only the greatest friend of Israel in the White House of all time, he is also a determined leader of the free world. He looks to future generations, decides what is best for America, and then acts with responsibility and courage. Together we bring great light to all who are rooted in the aspiration of human freedom. On your behalf, the citizens of Israel, I salute the commanders of the IDF and its soldiers, our Air Force, the Intelligence Directorate, the Mossad, the women and men of the security forces, the women and men of the rescue forces. I salute them for their courage and the strength of their work. I tell you, a whole nation stands behind you. A whole nation prays for your success. My brothers and sisters, in 2 days, we will celebrate the holiday of Purim. 2,500 years ago, in ancient Persia, an enemy rose up against us with exactly the same goal, to completely destroy our people. But Mordecai the Jew and the Queen of Persia, with their courage and resourcefulness, saved our people. In those days of Purim, Pur fell, and the evil master fell with it. Even today, on the holiday of Purim, the Pur has fallen, and the end of the evil regime will fall too. The prophet Amos says, "A lion has roared, who will not fear? In Operation Lion's Roar, we roar, fear not, Israel, for the lion's cub has been slain." We will stand as one man, with one heart, and with God's help, we will ensure the eternity of Israel.
If you like this video,
The eternity of Israel. Again, Zionist project. They're in apartheid country, so it's gonna be difficult for them to try and integrate into like an Iranian ideology because they're eventually gonna have their own question of how to unite a bunch of immigrants, which they have the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, but it doesn't exactly look like they're getting along. So you're gonna have to find somehow to talk to a lot of people to, in their interpretation, push civilization through the premise of understanding that a lot of those tribes or groups of people they just mentioned are gonna be at war, fighting for power, and then they're gonna have to try and pick the strongest one, which is a Darwin principle, really. So a regime swap is probably someone who's already puppeted by them, and a lot of people are going to see through that. They've been through regime swaps and they've been fighting Western civilization for quite a while, so it's going to be a very tricky situation. It seems like a pretty textbook explanation of why they're going to war, and it's up to you guys not to fight, because if you don't fight, we're just not going to kill you. We don't want to kill civilians. If civilians die, it's because there's someone there or something. The excuses go on. We saw it with Gaza. So you got to be very, very, very aware of how these people are approaching this situation, because some of them are good-hearted, some of them are not, and you're going to have to understand the actions, like where the bullets or the bombs are landing.